Welcome to Proclaiming Justice, a podcast from PJTN that focuses the light of truth on vital issues in today's headlines that impact every American. I'm your host, Laurie Cardoza-Moore, founder and president of Proclaiming Justice to the Nations, and I'm here to educate, motivate, and activate you to action. I want to arm you with the truth and the facts you'll need to fight and preserve our constitutional republic and uphold the Judeo-Christian values our nation was founded upon. Welcome to Proclaiming Justice, a PJTN podcast where we shine the light of biblical truth on vital issues from today's headlines that impact every American, Jew and Christian, people of faith, and people of conscience. I'm your host, Laurie Cardoza-Moore. If you missed the last episode of this podcast, you will find it and our previous podcast lineup on our website at pjtn.org, as well as all the other platforms that you use to access your favorite podcasts. On this week's podcast, I have invited PJTN Senior Academic Fellow Dr. Sandra Alfonsi to the podcast to discuss her research and textbook reviews in Florida and Tennessee. Over the last couple of years, Florida's Governor Ron DeSantis and Tennessee's Governor Bill Lee have adopted legislation banning antisemitism and CRT. Unfortunately, the textbooks do not reflect the recently adopted legislation. We're going to discuss what Dr. Alfonsi found and what we can do to ensure our textbooks and instructional materials reflect state standards and state statutes. I also want to remind you that it's important for you to listen and share this and all of our previous podcasts with your family and friends so that they can become more informed about this and other related issues that threaten our republic and the state of Israel. So please remember to like and share. Dr. Alfonsi, I want to welcome you back to Proclaiming Justice podcast. It's good to have you back on the show.
Thank you, Laurie. It's a pleasure to be back, and it's a pleasure to speak to the members of PJTN and to the outside world and bring our work where it belongs, which is to the public. So I'm happy to be here with you.
Well, thank you. And we are honored to be the beneficiary of the incredible work and the research that you have done. And Dr. Alfonsi, the work, let's talk a little bit about the work, about your past work that you've done, because you really are the leader in textbook reviews, and you have been for over 2 decades. Let's talk about the work that you have done and how long you've been at this work and why this problem with curriculum is so critically important that we speak up and demand accountability in the content that we are using to educate our children in America. Why is this issue so important, and how long have you been fighting this battle?
I would say, to be honest, that I've been doing this for more than 25 years. And why it is so important is that reviewing the textbooks was a question of looking for errors and finding material that was incorrect and working with the publishers to replace incorrect material by correct history. It was never about rewriting history to make it look good. It was about trying to go into the textbooks, find the errors, and have the publishing house correct this. Why this is important, why it has taken so long. People are not willing to look for or to speak about why we have not been successful in stopping the revisionism in the textbooks. And I believe truly that the public and all of us needs to learn that we are facing textbooks that have agendas that have been put into place for at least 20, 25 years. And the reason that we have these agendas is because, in truth, there has been a movement going on to absolutely destroy our government, to destroy the government of the United States, and to wreak havoc upon what was and must be restored to the greatest country in the world. And that is what has taken so long, is that I've been doing this for a long time, and it was always a question of errors.
Mm-hmm.
It question of revisionism. It was a question of, if we want to use the word, although it's simplistic, mistakes that were made because we had human beings, people writing textbooks. Came out of an era with textbook barns, which is the terminology where the textbooks were written by other teachers, and teachers wrote chapters in the books and not even necessarily in the chapters covering their material. That disappeared, and all of a sudden we had professionals. And I have to say nicely, but it is true, we had academics writing the textbooks. And instead of finding that the material was correct and there weren't so many errors, what we did find was an improvement in the grammar, an improvement in the and those kind of corrections. What none of us who have been doing this, and there aren't that many doing it, but what we have not recognized is that there had always been an agenda in place, and the agenda was basically to bring down the constitutional republic named the United States of America. And we had other organizations that were doing textbook reviews who were part and parcel of that agenda. We now call these the left wing versus the right wing, and they were leftists then, they were Marxists then, they were individuals bringing communism into our country. And for everything that we see in America, one thing that has always amazed me is the naivete of the Americans who believe, yes, we are the greatest country in the world, but we've done very little to recognize that we look at war and we think of weapons. We have never looked at the written word as a weapon to destroy a government. So that's where we are now. We are having, this is American Revolution number 2, as far as I'm concerned. The first one with cannons, etc. The second now, the American Revolution number 2, is being done by intellect, by vocabulary, by agenda, and those have replaced the critical, the bullets and the weapons. And this is what we are. And it didn't just happen today. We were smart enough to see that there were errors in the textbooks. We were not wise enough, or we were too naive to recognize that these are not mistakes. This is purposeful revisionism following an agenda. So that's why it's critical that we teach, like our members in PJTN, we teach everyone not to be afraid of using the word agenda, because that is what is bringing down the United States of America, is an agenda. But instead of bringing it down with bullets and cannons and guns, it is an academically fueled intellectual agenda for destroying the United States. And that, and I've repeated this, and you know this by now because you hear me all the time. I've repeated that it's the power of the language. And when you look at the CRT, critical race theory, or you look at the Black Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter encourages the violence of the streets, but the weapon in their hands is the language, the reconstruction language. Right. And that's where we are. And that's what makes us so important, that we understand that the word in front of the reader is more often a word that changes history. And that's this term fake news. It's fake history. Right. It's just fake news. It's fake history. And it's very, very difficult to stop now, because if it were yesterday, it would be much easier to address. But when it goes back 15 years and you find when this was introduced, it's very difficult, because we have trained generations, and a lot of those generations are now teaching in the classroom or making laws in the legislature. So it's a tremendous problem.
Yeah. So we really have got we've got our hands full. And the reality is that, PJTN got involved in this textbook and instructional materials issue a decade ago when a parent, one of our members actually, came to me. She also happened to be a parent in our community, for those of you who are not familiar with this story. But because the mission of PJTN has always been to combat anti-Semitism, we had a parent who reached out to us and said, "You'll never believe what we're teaching our children in Williamson County schools in Tennessee," which happens to be the county that we live in. We've been residents there since 1989, and we've seen a lot of changes in our community, but never in a million years would I've ever imagined that Williamson County school board members would approve, or for that matter, the state government, the textbook commission at that time that was constituted, would actually bring in textbooks that had anti-Semitic content that challenged the state of Israel, when the United States is, since the rebirth of the modern state of Israel, the United States has been a loyal supporter and friend to Israel. And so to find content in a textbook being used in one of our belt buckle of the Bible Belt schools was just absolutely shocking to me. And that's how we embarked on this journey. And not only did we find in that textbook with the anti-Semitic quote, we found anti-American, anti-Judeo-Christian, the values that our community believed in. I mean, this is a predominantly evangelical Christian community. 20 years, or a decade ago, even 20 years ago. So to find this kind of content was shocking. And that began the journey of becoming proactive in fighting anti-Semitism by using the curriculum, making sure by reviewing textbooks, by reviewing instructional materials, to make sure that what we were teaching our children was not going to undermine not just the Republic, but our unique relationship that we had with the state of Israel. And it's critically important that we teach America's children about this unique relationship, because America and Israel are allies, unlike any other two countries. And, the reason why we have that relationship is because of our faith, because we are talking about members of the Jewish community who stand in defense of Zion, who stand in defense of Israel, the state of Israel, who share the promise and the covenant that Abraham made, or God made with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and their descendants. So this is all part of our community. But never in a million years would we have anticipated that we'd find this. But as we started to dig in, of course, you came into the picture with PJTN because we became aware of the work that you had been doing with Hadassah in reviewing curriculum textbooks. And this was not foreign to you at that time. And so the role that you have played in researching the textbooks and instructional materials has been invaluable to us as an organization, and it's invaluable to launching a strategy to, like what you said, it's the war of words. It's not going to be on a battlefield. Our battlefield has changed. And so it's not going to be spilling blood. It's going to be fighting to take back the narrative, because as you just mentioned, our children have not been taught accurately. They have been indoctrinated for at least a decade, we know of, and probably even longer. And now we have to undo this problem. So, part of that undoing the issue that is before us, this threat that is before us for the minds of our children, it's reaching out to governors and their departments of education as well as even the local school board. This is so critically important. And for our PJTN Watchmen, we've been beating this drum about the school boards because really all politics is local, and the school boards hold the keys to the future of our country, our republic, as well as our children. And so it's critically important that we be engaged in this battle, and we challenge, we look for the content. It's a job that we can't just decide we're going to stop doing. We're going to have to be even more vigilant as the months and the years go on, because this is an all-out war for our freedom and our liberties that come only from Almighty God. So, part of, the work that we've done with you, Dr. Alfonsi, has been, and I'm very proud of the work that we did in Florida in reviewing the civic standards. We were honored to have been allowed and to participate with other organizations to review the Florida civic standards under Governor DeSantis, and his request to review those civic standards. He actually called for an emergency review because the civic standards were not up for review that year. And as a result of that, PJTN, Dr. Alfonsi and I were working diligently for months on reviewing the civic standards, drafting civic standards, and as a result of that, our contribution, one of the contributions, but the one that I'm the most proud of, is that was adopted by the Department of Education in Florida, was that now children in Florida, K through 12, are going to learn about the role that the Hebrew Bible played in the founding of our country, the role it played in the drafting of our founding documents, the role that it played in the structure and our form of government, which our children have not been taught. Many Americans do not even know this history, but it's important for us to understand why the Puritans came over here, that what their value systems were and what they believed. Why did our founding fathers have Bibles on their bookshelves? Why was faith important to them? And so it was to have a state Department of Education adopt those standards. There's no other state that I know of in the nation that has adopted similar standards. And this is important to the restoration of our nation. But we've continued to do work, and you recently are putting the final touches on reviewing math textbooks in Tennessee. That's what we're reviewing now is the Textbook Commission, and the audience knows. And if you don't know, that I was appointed to serve on the Textbook Commission for another 3 years. And math has been the math textbooks have been under review this past year. But like I said, we've also been involved in the state of Florida. So I'd like to, Dr. Alfonsi, just kind of talk about your research in the math textbooks. Now, you were not asked and tasked with the responsibility of making sure that 2 + 2 = 4. You were tasked with the responsibility of making sure that the math textbooks were in compliance with state standards in the state of Tennessee, and that there was no critical race theory in the content, because we're seeing this happen even in the math textbooks. They're pushing CRT and also Common Core to make sure that, Common Core is not in these textbooks because Governor Lee in the state of Tennessee did pass legislation to ban it. So tell us a little bit about what you found with the math textbooks that you've been reviewing that are under consideration right now in Tennessee.
Well, I have to say this quite honestly, that there is almost a total lack of transparency. I believe that we cannot say that there is no CRT because we don't see it. I think that the biggest problem right now is that the publishing houses believe that they have discovered a way to trick the state in the state adoption process because what I found looking at everything, I found the books looked clean. And I said, some of these publishing houses I know for a fact are proponents of CRT. They're proponents of STEM scope. They're proponents of of agenda, and yet they appear free of them. And I found, and this is what I think, if we go state by state, this is what we have to look at. Because just as an example, there's one publishing house named Accelerate Learning. Now, in the book, in what they present, I said, well, now that they're using digitals, it's very easy for them to present a very clean book to Tennessee to adopt, and then what the real is in the real textbook is somewhere else. Because what raised my attention is that nowhere in the book which we were presented with does it mention. I was trying to find whether they are aligned with the Tennessee math standards, because I said if they're aligned with the Tennessee math standards, and the Tennessee math standards do not allow Common Core, or they do not allow CRT, then it should be a very clean book. But what I found hidden away, and the only way I can say that honestly, is that if I were not a researcher and loved the challenge of clicking on links that would take me who knows where, I wouldn't have found a lot of this, because the book the link that you gave me, that we were provided with, took me to a digital. And when I finally could get access, when I looked and I read and I checked the math and I thought I didn't see anything, I decided, let me go and look at the website of the publishing house with this series of books. And so what I found is exactly it. The publisher defines itself as aligned with the Tennessee Math Academic Standards. It defines itself as aligned with Common Core standards. So we find that what giving to the reviewers, and this is which I think you're aware of, because we talk all the time and we do this together, but what must be made known is that there is a lack of transparency is one thing, but I find that there is a deliberate camouflage, because they're aligned with the state standards, which is supposed to make them acceptable. But when I looked far enough into their website with the names of this particular series of books, I find that it defines itself as aligned with Common Core. Now that's a problem, not just in one. But that is an important problem, because I found, like there's STEM, which is STEM education. I found they're doing it in a way that it is not controversial. They're really doing it correctly. But what I found was a sentence. So STEM education and the application of technology empowers every student to use their creativity and develop critical thinking skills. So far, we're safe, because if they're using STEM, they are going to do critical thinking, which is not being directed by agenda-based writers of the textbook. So then I found the benefits of STEM education are far-reaching for students of all ages. And then I found this quote, and backgrounds, as recent years have seen initiatives intended to add more females and minorities to STEM fields, end quote. What does that mean to us? We're looking at critical race. We're looking at CRT.
Yes.
We are at also DEI, and you can find the name DEI, but DEI is diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Right.
Therefore, we're facing hidden away inside somewhere on the website of a publishing house, all of the damaging information that the State Board of Education that from Tennessee should have gotten if it were indeed not an ingenious method of hiding it. So there is the end of the transparency. So when I found that, I said, now I'm going to come forward with the fact that this publishing house, which says it's aligned with the Tennessee standards, actually also, if you look closely enough in writing, it's aligned with Common Core standards. And if you look really closely, you find it emulates DEI. And therefore, you have all of these elements, which really, when you look at it, I see we are looking for something that is very striking, very apparent. CRT, everybody equates with the introduction of sexuality into the textbooks. Well, if you want to look at a math textbook and 2 and 2 make 4, and it's done in a way that it doesn't look like Common Core, it's fine. But when you look at the vocabulary that is hidden and disguised, and you have to have somebody that is intent on looking at the vocabulary, we find one that is already problematic. So then I went into a second one, Amplify, that's the name of the company, Amplify K through 12. And it makes a statement. If I said, never mind looking at the book, let me see what their website says. And their website says that DEI that's the statement of Amplify. And this is what it says. Amplify is committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion in the culture we build, the people we hire, and the products and services we provide, both for the educators and the students, end quote. Now, it doesn't, I looked at what they provided, and I know that I was making you crazy at times saying that there's got to be a difference between what we are given to review and what is actually there. And that I don't spend my life trying to find these matters. I'm not paranoid, and I don't look for that, but it's very peculiar when and I came to you with permission to state this, that when I reviewed their textbooks, I didn't find anything problematic or agenda based on DEI or CRT. But it raised the question, and I brought it to you. I said, this is putting a different question. We have, if it's not in the book, we have absolutely no information on what teachers are allowed to bring into the classroom, extracurricular material or agenda-based material. And there is the other issue. Their textbooks may look quote unquote clean. We may not. The reviewers, and I believe in I believe in the parents. I believe in the people reviewing, and I think that it's very important. The problem is we don't really know what to look for, but they know what they put in. And the question of the teachers has always been something you and I've discussed over the past years, what they are allowed to bring in. And then some of the textbooks, when I get the teacher's edition, I find the information in the margins. The first time I found it, I thought there was something really wrong with me because I'm reading the textbook and then my eyes are going into the margin. They don't match. But what it is, it's feeding the teachers margins, what to bring in, what to say, how to define it, we had an issue, we had an issue, I think the second year that we were together over a textbook where critical thinking, the exercises on critical thinking were prepared in such a way to lead the student from step 1 to step 2, step 3, and arrive at the conclusion of the agenda-based revision in history. And this is what I find the same thing. So this is one big problem that I think we have to understand, that nothing is as it appears to be. And by the fact that they have these academics who are writing these books who are leftists, they are Bolsheviks, they are communists, and they definitely have brought over all of this from Europe, and brought it into the United States, that I learned that unfortunately, to me, when it says core math or core curriculum, we interpreted the word core to mean basic. The core curriculum is basic, like adding, subtracting, etc. Just to simplify it. But since it's not capitalized, I started reading it and wondering whether this isn't the signal that we've been missing for a long time, that
Hmm.
core curriculum is actually the vocabulary for Common Core.
Right.
And there is no other way to understand it. And
Right.
so I think that we have a tremendous problem because, Lori, these books are beautiful to look at. And I'm talking about the graphics are clear. They have exercises which are very practical. The questions are to the students are thought provoking. They're personally aligned, and there's nothing you don't see in the agenda because they ask the children K through 12. This one is sixth grade. How well did you understand the math in the lesson? How do you feel about learning math in this lesson? And it engages a dialogue so you understand whether the student has understood it or not. So I think we're facing really something which is a tremendous problem. Now, as an aside, that what the what this I'm laughing because it's something that the State Board of Education must have someone on staff to test the links that the publishing houses provide for the reviewers because out of 13, there were 4 links, 2 that never worked. And those, which amazingly so, I went back on, they had changed the password. And it doesn't make the review easy. And the other thing is that, and I raised the question to you, they are tracking because I would be on reading everything and they would pop up onto my computer. How can we help you? Is there something would you like to ask a question? So I said to myself, I've made my computer very vulnerable to being tracked. So
Right.
it's something that we have to deal with.
Big Brother is watching you, Sandra, as you go through the website, and they want to know what you're looking at and what you're interested in. I mean, you can't just go to an educator's or education website or textbook publisher's website and just review the material at your leisure in your privacy because somebody is watching you on the other end.
Yes. And I'm convinced that several times I was in something and it shut down and didn't do any damage to my computer, but it disappeared. And then when I would try to get back on, it was even more difficult to get back on. So I know that we are being monitored. Now they don't have that problem with the people. The parents who are willing to look at the books because basically they're looking for is the addition, is this, is that. But when you go inside and I suddenly click off of the book and go onto the website, I was being tracked and I decided one time just let me see what happens. And it was a Real Math. That was the name of the series of books from the publisher. And this popped up. What is it that we can help you find? So I said to myself, well, let me tell them and see if I get an answer. So I said, this is who I am. And I said, in order to recommend your books to the state of Tennessee, I just need to know whether you're Common Core aligned. And I said, I know the abbreviation is CCSS, the Common Core State Standards. I said, I'm looking everywhere just to find it so that I would be able, yes or no, to recommend your books. And I can tell you honestly, I never thought, excuse me, that I would get an answer. And the next day, I got a very proud answer right back telling me that yes, it is Common Core State Standards aligned. And is there anything else we can help you with? But if you need to, there are people who can talk to you. And I wrote back, I thanked for her honesty. And that was the that I needed. I didn't tell what I was going to do with it, but I just had the audacity. But when you have grassroots, I mean, you have a magnificent grassroots organization, and well-meaning parents will do that. Will try to review, and then we have problems with other organizations that have their own private political agenda, that will do more damage than good, and we have to very carefully go around them. But this is what I found in the books, and what makes it difficult in this series of math books is that the publishing houses have found a methodology that's excellent, and the graphics are excellent, and it facilitates learning, and all of this. And I must say that I was very pleased. I thought even the English is correct, and they it'll help prepare the students to be part of an educated American society if they only are teaching what it's supposed to be. But that raises the question, my question to you, because you of something you said earlier when you said our American children. I think that we need to reassess what is meant by that, Lori, because this is no longer the amalgamated, and I'm not talking about assimilation and losing identity. We no longer have an amalgamated society. And therefore, our American children, they're American children because they live in America. Sometimes their parents are green card holders. Sometimes we don't know what they are. And then even the ones that the parents are born in America, the children are born in America, but it has been, let's make it generous, at least a decade that are not amalgamated. Our children, not to be uniform, but they need to be raised under with the guidance and the guidelines that this country was founded upon. So we assume, correctly so, what used to be in the families used to be in the education system. And when we look now that their parents were educated in school with the same books, just a different edition, we no longer have our American children. They're children that live in America with different precepts, with different understandings, with different principles. And it makes educating them very difficult because we're not looking at America as America was and was intended to be. So I think it took me a long time to understand that the the children that come in are the offspring of the children who were educated a generation ago by Prentice Hall, by Pearson, that were educated by Macmillan, that we are looking at a different definition of our American children because the unity is missing and it makes teaching very difficult.
That's
So
right.
that's something that I finally started to look at. That I'm an educator. I'm a teacher. Yes, I have big children. They were 18 years old when they started college, but their bodies were big and they were still kids. But there was no unity inside them. They had principles, different precepts, different levels of learning. Now, these textbooks, I will say that if we would find textbooks like this with the quality of the education and the quality of the English, I was thrilled with the level of the English and the fact that I read some of the Spanish to make sure that there were no changes, that we would produce a new generation of well-educated American youngsters, and we would be able to regain our position in the education world. But that's only a fantasy because so the language is nice and the English is nice and the graphics are nice, but what are we teaching when hidden away is an open admission? And that seems like it's contradictory. It's hidden away, but it's open. You just have to go find it. And they like I found one, and it took no problem. I found with a company that called CPM, and they have a big statement: Common Core Compliant.
Yeah.
Course one. So we find it, but we find it in a book that if you aren't aware what that means, or like the state has has removed it from use, you're finding textbooks that are very, very well done, which is answering a lot of the critique of the poorly designed and poorly connected textbooks. And so we have to be very, very careful of these things.
So let me ask you this, Dr. Alfonsi.
Yes.
In your research of the math books that you were able to review, just to be clear, were you able to review all of them, or were there some where you were hindered and unable to complete your review? Because
Two, I was unable to access no matter what I did.
and what were those books? Because I will tell you, this podcast is going to go out to our whole list, and many state legislators in Tennessee, and in other states for that matter. So this is going to be information that they're going to have access to and to be able to look for. But specifically as it pertains to Tennessee, these books were voted on and approved back in July. There was a hearing, and they were voted on and adopted for use in Tennessee schools. But you're saying in the research and the review that you did, these books are not compliant with state standards or state statutes because they are teaching our children Common Core. That is the philosophy of the publisher. In fact, I recall watching the hearing because I was not allowed to participate for whatever reason. The Department of Education closed me out as the representative for parents and citizens across the state. They prevented me from having a voice, from being at that meeting. I didn't get the information about that meeting until 2 days before with the agenda, and I requested a link so I could participate since they didn't give it to me, within the 10-day requirement by law. I asked for a link, and the only link they sent to me was not one that I could communicate and ask questions of the representatives of the textbook publishers that were presenting that day. But as I watched the hearing unfold, they targeted Pearson publishers, and they refused to allow Pearson publishers to submit their textbooks because they admitted, when asked in that hearing, if these textbooks are Common Core aligned, and the representative did say, yes, they were, but the books that they were going to submit would not be Common Core compliant. Well, the chairman completely flat out rejected all of the books that Pearson was submitting because they were Common Core aligned, which made them in violation of state standards and state statutes in Tennessee. So this is important because, as I said, the legislators are going to get a copy of this, and they're going to need to hear that what happened is that textbook commission actually adopted and approved textbooks that are Common Core compliant and are in violation of state statute and state standards in the state of Tennessee. And that's what we're going to be using unless the legislature puts a halt to the textbooks and the curriculum submitted because they do violate state law. So this is going to be an issue that we have to address, but it's important for the audience to understand that we are looking specifically for the issues that would make these textbooks unacceptable for use in the state of Tennessee, as we're discussing this right now. So there were books that you felt that you were not able to access because there were too many problems, too many issues with the links. And this is a problem that I hear from many parents as well. It's not just a reviewer and someone who is experienced, who's done this for over 2 decades, but it's parents also are being locked out of the system. They can't access. And when they ask for the link, and I mean, I had to keep repeatedly asking for the login information and the password to access this content. And I am a member of the Textbook Commission. So, Dr. Alfonsi, what did you find with regards to these books? Were there any that were in compliance with state standards and state statute?
Okay, now, first of all, there are most of them, I found the reference to, they're aligned with Tennessee academic standards. I found that math standards. But I'll start with the first company, Accelerate Learning. They were made almost impossible to access. So I went to their websites. I went to the website and I went through the website literally link by link. And that's where I found, first of all, that it defines itself as aligned with Tennessee academic states, the state standards. But I also found clearly it defines itself as aligned with Common Core standards. That raises the question: you can't have one book that's aligned and then you have another book that is not. But then concerning CRT, that's where I found for the first time about STEM scope math, which you and I had discussed based on other books. And that was where I found that sentence about the diversity, equity, and inclusion, the DEI ideology. And I said, okay, there, without mentioning CRT or the link between DEI and CRT, there we have another issue, because STEM means it stands for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. That seems clear. It's an interdisciplinary approach. And you would find this is a STEM project, this is a STEM project, and I would read it, and what you get is that those are the issues that are in there. That's how you're teaching the student. But when I go back there to that, I found, isn't that interesting? The fact is, to add more females and minorities to the STEM field, that has nothing to do with STEM. That's DEI and that's CRT. So they have hidden, they have chocolate covered this, and this is how it came in with accelerated learning. Then Amplify Learning K through 12 has its statement of purpose outright. It's committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Therefore, I looked at those their textbooks, looking for problematic agenda-based DEI bias or hints of CR. I didn't find that. What I found was the question, okay, if I don't find that readily, and also because I don't know whether the digital books provided for review are actually the digital books that are being sold, that is a question that opened up in my mind when I thought it's so easy to present to the commission and to the state board a digital that is in semblance resembles what the book is. So that's a question that I started to worry about or to think about. But I have to say that with this, I didn't find anything that I could visibly identify as that. But it raised a question by some of the sentences and instructions to the teacher, what the teachers can bring into the classroom in extracurricular material or their own personal agenda bias. This is the methodology, and the publisher's defined methodology was very interesting because it's DEI. But the way they defined it, they could not be brought forward and say, look, you're teaching CRT. They just changed the language.
Right.
So that's that publishing house. There are other publishing houses that I went through, and I found STEM, and I read this whole thing until I worked out that methodology is okay. With Cengage, no matter where I looked, there was nothing mentioning any compliance to state standards, and there was nothing mentioning compliance to Common Core. it was not unusual to find some of these that did not mention compliance to Tennessee state math standards. The question being why, if it's very easy, if Tennessee demands it to be standard compliant, they have to go through and do it. But this Cengage I've dealt with, unfortunately, and however we look at it, I've dealt with it, and there's what alarmed me is that there's no mention of compliance to Tennessee state standards.
Right.
Some of the publishing houses are very, very proud to state outright that they're in compliance with that. Cengage has no compliance to anything, not to Tennessee state standards, not to Common Core, and the STEM was only in science textbooks, so we wouldn't know what it does anyway. Then found with CPM that it came right out and said core connections, Common Core compliance. So I didn't even have to look, but at the same time, and this is where I think that your commission needs to look at it. They state Common Core compliant, and they give the information on the core connections, etc. That's when I learned CCSS. I didn't even know what the abbreviation. I saw it and I said, I have to know what it says. And that's where I found out, looking it up, Common Core state standards as of 2010. But I found along with it, Tennessee state math standards compliant. So there is a conflict. Here's another one, the iReady classroom mathematics. There's the same conflict there, Lori, that they make the statement, it's Tennessee state math standards compliant and it's Common Core compliant.
Right.
And they have a whole they had an article that I found online about the importance of Common Core state standards. And I learned CCSS and then the teaching of English language learners, ELLS. And I read this and the importance of Common Core to this particular publishing house. But I think that we're being thrown off by the fact that we see compliant to Tennessee math state standards. We see that and we say, oh, okay. Well, how? What bothered me is in most books that I've dealt with since beginning to work together with you, like with civics and that, they actually list which standard, the state standard identification, what it is, and then they show what's found in the book. This is not in these books. So that it's in one of two places. Maybe this is just the digital that's being provided, like, to calm everyone down, but I don't think so. If they don't give the reviewer the vision or the view of which standards are being followed, then they can say that they're compliant to God knows what, and it doesn't mean anything.
Right.
It's something which we found. Then there's a series of books that great minds. There's no mention of Common Core compliance. There's no mention of state compliance, but they're really nice books. The English is excellent. It's they're the Eureka Math, and here I found I had to go look. Can you imagine, great minds? I had to go look up Eureka Math Tennessee edition. Quote, is a revolutionary new standards aligned K through 5. And I'm like, okay, I don't have any idea. I mean, I know what it's supposed to mean, but those who are dealing with state standards really need to look and see what it's aligned with. And Houghton Mifflin, you and I have spent a lot of time on Houghton Mifflin, and nothing was available. I mean, I found the mention to STEM. There wasn't in Houghton Mifflin Harcourt any connection between STEM and CRT. But and this I wrote, to be honest, I finally, after searching for Houghton Mifflin Harcourt alignment with the Tennessee state math standards and or Common Core standards, I didn't find any mention of the Tennessee state math standards, but found two sources for Common Core, one on the website and one in a sentence. And that's part of what I read are sentences where I found hidden away the alignments that it's safe to, I could advise that Houghton Mifflin Harcourt Common Core aligned. This is what I've been finding. And when it came to real math, I mean, I had a field day with them because they came back and said, yes, we are, because they thought that's what I was looking for.
Right.
But I found links back and forth, which you had, especially with Houghton Mifflin Harcourt, because they are also one of them. They are a very dangerous publishing house, and so I finally found links to another program which is integrated into their program, and that is hardcore Common Core, and it's there for your use. So yes, I found the biggest problem, like with Imagine Learning. They're very fine. They're very proud of the fact they are aligned, Tennessee state standard aligned, and then it teaches, but there's nothing there with a link to Common Core. But I said, I don't know what I'm doing until I found this little note that said Learn Zillion. There was an announcement that Learn Zillion is now Imagine Learning. And I looked it up. And what did I find? That Learn Zillion is the link, the missing link to Common Core. And it is now integrated in Imagine Learning. And just one statement, third grade Common Core standards, cheat sheet, teaching resources. There is for the teachers. That's how the teachers are taught to institute the Common Core, which the Imagine Learning mentions only Tennessee state standards. But because I wanted to know what Learn Zillion, what in the world it was, now that it says, it doesn't say incorporated into, it says Learn Zillion is now Imagine Learning. And I said, there's our missing link to Common Core. But not the average parent doesn't know what to look for. But I truly believe that the commission, and they have to understand, the State Board of Education, that the subterfuge now in the publishing houses, and they are very, very, very clever, because they've hidden things that unless you go to look for it, I don't think that when we would see the textbook, I don't know, for sure, but I don't think we would see it that openly. But knowing that now we have to look for it, it is definitely something that we have to deal with.
Yeah. Well, is there any, as we're closing up, Dr. Alfonsi, in reviewing the books, the math books for Tennessee, were there any books that weren't Common Core compliant, and also were not riddled with DEI or CRT? Because, and for the audience, just to be very clear, the whole concept of CRT and DEI, we are teaching our children. We're not focused on whether they're male or female, what color of skin they come from. Our children in America each get an education. That education is not based on their race, their gender. They are treated just like all the other children in every classroom across the United States, just like it was for me growing up. My teachers weren't concerned whether I was a girl or whether I was, getting the agenda-based education. All my teachers were tasked to do was to make sure in math that I could add and subtract, multiply and divide. They gave me the foundation to be able to pursue the higher level mathematics. But it wasn't because I was a female. And when we start focusing on the gender of an individual or the race of an individual, then our focus is off teaching them. And that has to stop. And so, Dr. Alfonsi, my last question, was there any publisher that you would recommend to the Textbook Commission, to the Department of Education, that fit within the state statutes and the state standards, which would be suitable for teaching math in Tennessee?
Very honestly, no, because from what I got from all of this is that while they may not be Common Core compliant or aligned because they don't say it, that the prevalence now of finding the vocabulary of DEI, of finding the SEL vocabulary, all of this, the SEL vocabulary, that I believe that each one of these companies has really put a smokescreen, that's a good way to describe it, a smokescreen over Common Core and CRT so that it can pass under it and be adopted. But do I think that any of these? No, I think that they are definitely built to be Common Core, built to be CRT, and I think that the statements by some of these publishing houses, like this one was very dangerous. I know McGraw-Hill is dangerous, but their books for Tennessee are called Tennessee Reveal Math K through 5. Their statement, we developed Reveal Math in collaboration with leading scholars, researchers, and educators. Our research-based approach to social and emotional learning, SEL, educational equity, student agency, and more ensure that students learn in ways that work for them, end quote. That is a red flag, Lori. That is a red flag to the state of Tennessee and to anywhere else where these books are. So no, I wouldn't recommend them. And that's without checking that 2 and 2 makes 4. That's fine, because I did a lot of it. I wanted to see how the algebra was taught. Did I understand it? But when I went to look to the core, and the core really turned out to be each individual website, not what is presented to the commission to review and to be adopted. It is in the declarations of these publishing houses that you find that indeed these are the enemies. These are the indoctrination via mathematics, and it is very serious because they are hiding behind the statements of the Tennessee math, aligned with the Tennessee math standards. Mm-hmm. The declaration of falsehood, unless we don't know what their standards are, and they don't appear. I just find it very bizarre that I'm looking at book after book after book, and there isn't, it says standards. I clicked on it, nothing opens up. So those are questions that the commission has to ask: where and how, what makes them blind? And no, I would not recommend this, because I couldn't recommend the work we've done together on civics, or what we've done together on the Holocaust, or on history. Mm-hmm. These are the most dangerous of the publishing houses, but what makes them very strong is that these books are beautifully prepared, and they look like they teach wonderfully to the children, to the young people. So that is what I found.
Well, I so appreciate you taking the time to be with us today, to breaking this down and explaining it to our audience, whether you are a state legislator, whether you're a member of the Department of Education, whether you are a parent or a tax-paying citizen. We cannot go through the process of rushing through to approve curriculum or instructional materials, textbooks, that are not in compliance with state standards and state statute. And if there are questions about these publishers, these questions need to be asked. If we can't readily access to see, is this compliant with state standards? Is it Common Core state standard compliant? Is this riddled with CRT, DEI, SEL? If we can't determine that from reviewing it, then it is up to the textbook publisher to assure the members of the commission, the textbook commission, that these books are not in violation with our state statutes and our state standards. The onus is on them. It is not the duty of the commission to just rush through and approve things when we haven't done our homework. And yes, this commission in Tennessee appointed experts, math experts, to review the math content to make sure that the math was good, but they were not looking at whether there was CRT or SEL. They were not looking to make sure that these were not Common Core compliant. This is an important and a duty, a responsibility of those members of this commission, especially today with everything that we are facing, the struggles, the indoctrination, the propaganda that our children are being subjected to. So in closing, Dr. Alfonsi, are there any final comments you would like to share with our audience, with the state legislator? Because again, the state legislators are going to have to deal with this issue. And of course, the textbook commission, the member of the commission, are going to have to address this issue, because once parents find out in Tennessee that math books have been approved that are in violation with state standards and state law, our state statutes, I would not be a happy parent or taxpayer to know that my money, my tax dollars, are going to fund curriculum that is unacceptable, that violates state statute, and also violates the state standards for education. What are your closing comments?
My closing comments are really very basic. That textbooks are a product. You go into a store and you see a damaged can. You don't buy the can of the vegetables because you know that there's poisonous gas. You go into a store, you go to buy a piece of clothing, and you see that it's been damaged. Textbooks are a product. Companies are raising money or earning money off damaged products. But what we're not accepting and what we're not dealing with is that what looks nice can be poisonous. These textbooks, a publishing house that publishes revisionist history that destroys the vision of the founding fathers, we go through them. They do not produce math books that are pure and sacred. We have to understand that a book is a product. These are very damaged products produced by very mentally, intellectually damaged companies that are part of an agenda to destroy the United States, and not just the exceptionalism. We are looking at textbooks that are destroying the Constitution, that are teaching hatred, that are teaching anti-Semitism. Then when you go into the math books, from what I understand that I didn't see here, in examples, they're teaching racism, they're teaching critical race theory in their examples. Mm-hmm. We understand that this is a product. This is nothing that came down with the Bible from Mount Sinai. This is a man-produced product, and we have the same problem sitting in our state legislature. We have the same problem sitting in the education system. We have their warped product, their tool to destroy the United States of America and its Constitution, everything. Mm-hmm. It is a book. It is a product. And mm-hmm. I that the legislators must understand, and this is, to me, is a question of revisionism versus history. And parents must understand that they are no longer in charge of the lives of their children, that they have handed over the souls of their children to the most decadent possibility in those who write and those who sell. But the bottom line is, to everyone, this legislature, the parent, all of us, this is a flawed product across the board. It is not the Bible handed down from Mount Sinai. It is not anything. It is a flawed product that we are responsible for because we buy it, we don't question it, and we look at it and say, what does it matter? It matters. Look at our country now. It matters. That's what I want to say.
That's a great closing statement. This is defective merchandise, ladies and gentlemen. And why would we spend our money on defective merchandise? What needs to happen is this curriculum, the Department of Education, the textbook commission specifically, needs to go back to the publishers, tell them you have submitted damaged goods upon further review, and we want a product that is in line with our state standards and also in line with state statute. So, Dr. Alfonsi, thank you again for joining us. We're going to have you come back again, and we're going to talk about what we found in the Florida textbooks. And for our audience, just so you know, PJTN has published a white paper. Dr. Alfonsi has done extensive research, an incredible job in reviewing the books in Florida, being used in Florida, that are unfortunately in violation of their state statutes and their state standards. So we're gonna have Dr. Alfonsi back on. We're going to talk about this. And so, Dr. Alfonsi, thank you so much for joining us once again. It's a great honor to have you. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed this program. I hope you found it informative. We will post this podcast on our website and all of our podcast platforms so that you can share with your family and friends. As PJTN Watchmen, we have a biblical mandate to stand against the ungodly rising Marxist threat that is destroying this nation and other Western nations, threatening our Judeo-Christian values and promoting anti-Semitism. We cannot remain silent, ladies and gentlemen. God warned the prophet Ezekiel about the responsibility of the watchman. And if the watchman sees the enemy advancing, like what's happening, the enemy is advancing in our classrooms with our children. And if we see the enemy advancing, it is our duty, it is our responsibility to warn the inhabitants of our community, to warn our neighbors, to warn our families and friends. And if we don't warn them, knowing the truth now we've been informed, now we're going to be held responsible by what we do and what we don't do. And this goes to our state legislators as well, and this commission. We are duty bound now because we have made an oath. We've taken an oath. And if we do not speak out and warn our community, warn our states, warn the citizens about what we're doing to our children, what we're getting ready to subject our children to, that if we lose any one of these little kids, it is very clear in the Bible that we are going to be held responsible. In fact, in the New Testament, it talks about those who would even mislead one of these my little ones, that it would be better that a millstone be wrapped around your neck and be thrown into the depths of the sea. That is how serious God takes this. So as a watchman, you can sound the alarm and warn others by simply sharing this podcast with your family and friends. We need to make this information go viral. So please share and like this podcast to help sound the alarm in your community. Dietrich Bonhoeffer reminded us that silence in the face of evil is itself evil. God will not hold us guiltless. Not to speak is to speak. Not to act is to act. Don't forget to join us for our next week's podcast as we continue this conversation about combating the rise of anti-Semitism and taking back local control of our communities and our children's education. I want to also remind you that if you have not signed up to become a PJTN Watchman, you can help support this mission through our award-winning documentaries and Focus on Israel programs, as well as more programs like this for just $20 a month. So go to our website at pjtn.org to watch pjtn.org to watch our programs and listen to our past podcasts. With your generous donation, you can ensure that PJTN remains on the front lines and in the headlines, but we can't do it without your faithful prayers and financial support. I hope that you will prayerfully consider supporting our mission as we educate to activate Jews, Christians, and all people of conscience to stand on the front lines of this all-encompassing war. God bless you and thank you for all you do on behalf of our Jewish brethren, the State of Israel, and these United States. Thank you again for joining me on this edition of Proclaiming Justice. Please share this podcast with your family and friends. For more information about how you can get involved, please visit our website at pjtn.org. As a PJTN Watchman, you can help us keep up the fight to preserve our freedom for our children and their children for such a time as this.